I was staring at my computer screen in complete disbelief when my phone rang at 8:47 p.m. on a Tuesday night. The caller ID showed Marcus Chen, CEO TechFlow Industries, and my hands actually trembled as I reached for the phone. 3 weeks earlier, this same man had slashed my department's budget by 60% and reassigned half my team to other divisions, claiming my marketing initiatives weren't delivering measurable ROI. What he didn't know was that during those 3 weeks of professional humiliation, I had quietly orchestrated the acquisition of his company's most valuable client through my own newly formed consulting firm. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Now TechFlow's biggest revenue source belonged to me, and Marcus was about to discover that the marketing executive he'd dismissed as expendable had just become the person who controlled his company's financial future. The morning that changed everything started like any other Wednesday at TechFlow Industries. I arrived at our downtown Seattle office at 7:15, precisely 45 minutes before the official start time, carrying my usual large coffee and the presentation materials I'd been perfecting since 5 a.m. My corner office on the 20th floor offered a spectacular view of Elliott Bay, but I rarely had time to appreciate it during the relentless pace of managing TechFlow's digital marketing division. At 34, I had built what I considered a successful career in technology marketing, though I was beginning to suspect that my definition of success differed significantly from the corporate metrics that seemed to drive every decision at TechFlow. My office reflected my personality, organized but not sterile, with carefully curated plants that somehow thrived despite the fluorescent lighting, and walls decorated with campaign analytics rather than generic motivational posters. The only truly personal touch was a small succulent garden on my windowsill, a hobby I'd developed during the long hours spent strategizing digital campaigns. As Senior Director of Digital Marketing, I had spent the past 5 years transforming TechFlow's approach to customer acquisition and brand development. When I first joined the company, their marketing efforts were scattered across traditional channels with minimal digital presence and even less strategic cohesion. I had systematically built comprehensive digital infrastructure, developed data-driven campaign methodologies, and established relationships with key industry influencers that had expanded TechFlow's market reach exponentially. My team of 12 specialists represented some of the most talented digital marketers in the Pacific Northwest. I had personally recruited each member, focusing not just on technical skills but on innovative thinking and collaborative problem-solving abilities. Together, we had launched campaigns that consistently exceeded engagement targets, developed content strategies that positioned TechFlow as a thought leader in cloud computing solutions, and established social media presence that generated qualified leads at rates that surpassed industry benchmarks. The success metrics were undeniable, though I was learning that corporate leadership measured success through different lenses than I considered most relevant. Our campaigns had increased brand awareness by 230% over 3 years, generated over 8,000 qualified leads annually, and contributed to customer acquisition costs that were 40% below industry averages. Yet despite these achievements, I constantly found myself defending budget allocations and justifying strategic decisions to executives who seemed more interested in immediate cost reduction than long-term brand building. Marcus Chen had joined TechFlow as CEO 18 months earlier, recruited from a larger technology firm with promises of operational efficiency and revenue optimization. At 42, he carried himself with the confident authority of someone who had spent his career climbing corporate hierarchies through strategic positioning rather than innovative contribution. His management philosophy emphasized measurable short-term outcomes over strategic investment, a perspective that had immediately created tension with my approach to marketing development. From our first leadership meeting, I sensed that Marcus viewed marketing as a necessary expense rather than a strategic asset. He frequently questioned campaign budgets that couldn't demonstrate immediate revenue attribution. Despite my explanations about the extended sales cycles common in B2B technology marketing, his background in operations and finance left him with limited understanding of how brand development and thought leadership contributed to customer acquisition in our industry. The friction had been building for months through countless budget review meetings, where I found myself translating marketing strategy into language that emphasized cost control rather than growth potential. Marcus consistently pushed for campaigns that could demonstrate direct lead-to-sale conversion within quarterly reporting periods, while I advocated for longer-term brand-building initiatives that would establish TechFlow's competitive positioning over multiple years. Our most significant disagreement had centered on the relationship I had been developing with Pinnacle Systems, a Fortune 500 manufacturing company that represented exactly the type of enterprise client TechFlow needed to achieve sustainable growth. Pinnacle's digital transformation initiative required sophisticated cloud computing solutions, precisely the type of complex implementation that TechFlow specialized in providing. However, their decision-making process involved multiple stakeholders across several departments, requiring sustained relationship building rather than transactional sales approaches. I had spent 8 months cultivating this relationship through carefully orchestrated thought leadership content, executive networking events, and consultative conversations with Pinnacle's IT leadership team. The strategy required significant time investment and budget allocation for content development, event participation, and relationship maintenance activities that didn't generate immediate revenue, but were building the foundation for what could become TechFlow's largest contract. Marcus had consistently questioned these expenditures, arguing that the marketing budget should focus on generating immediate leads rather than what he characterized as speculative relationship building. During our monthly budget reviews, he would scrutinize every expense related to the Pinnacle initiative, demanding justification for conference attendance, content development costs, and the time my team spent creating customized presentations for their executive team. Despite his skepticism, the strategy was working. Pinnacle's chief technology officer had begun including me in strategic planning conversations about their digital transformation timeline. Their IT director regularly sought my input on cloud computing trends and implementation best practices. Most significantly, they had invited TechFlow to participate in a formal vendor evaluation process for a 3-year cloud infrastructure contract worth $12 million annually. This opportunity represented more than just revenue potential for TechFlow. Pinnacle Systems operated across multiple industries and had established partnerships with dozens of other Fortune 500 companies. Securing their contract would position TechFlow as a proven enterprise solution provider, opening doors to similar opportunities across Pinnacle's extensive business network. The relationship I had been building wasn't just about one client. It was about establishing TechFlow's credibility in the enterprise market segment. However, Marcus seemed unable to appreciate the strategic value of this positioning. His focus remained fixed on quarterly metrics and immediate cost justification, perspectives that fundamentally misaligned with the patient relationship building required for enterprise sales success. The tension between our approaches. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Had been escalating for months, creating an increasingly uncomfortable dynamic in leadership meetings, where I found myself defending long-term strategy against short-term cost optimization. The breaking point came during a particularly contentious budget review meeting in early October. Marcus had called together the senior leadership team to discuss Q4 budget adjustments, ostensibly to optimize spending across departments before year-end reporting. The meeting was held in TechFlow's main conference room, a sterile space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, but an atmosphere that somehow managed to feel claustrophobic during difficult conversations. Present were Marcus, myself, Sarah Williams, our Chief Financial Officer, David Park, our Head of Sales, and Jennifer Torres, our VP of Operations. The agenda appeared routine budget review and planning for the following year, but I sensed unusual tension in the room from the moment we assembled. Marcus seemed unusually formal. Sarah avoided making eye contact, and David appeared uncomfortable in a way that suggested prior conversations had occurred without my participation. Marcus began the meeting with what sounded like prepared remarks rather than his usual informal approach to team discussions. He spoke about the need for operational efficiency, cost optimization, and strategic resource allocation in increasingly competitive market conditions. The language felt corporate and distanced, lacking the collaborative tone that had characterized our previous planning sessions. As he continued outlining budget pressures and efficiency requirements, I realized this wasn't a collaborative planning session, but a predetermined announcement disguised as team consultation. The budget adjustments had already been decided, and this meeting was designed to communicate decisions rather than gather input or explore alternatives. When Marcus finally addressed my department specifically, his tone shifted to what I recognized as carefully rehearsed corporate communication, designed to minimize confrontation while delivering unpleasant news. He explained that marketing expenses had been analyzed against revenue attribution metrics and found to be inconsistent with TechFlow's efficiency targets. The digital marketing budget would be reduced by 60% effective immediately, with corresponding adjustments to team structure and campaign scope. The announcement hit me like a physical blow, though I maintained professional composure through years of experience managing difficult client conversations. 60% budget reduction meant eliminating nearly everything we had been building: strategic content development, relationship-building initiatives, conference participation, and most of the innovative campaigns that had been generating TechFlow's marketing success. More devastating than the budget cuts was Marcus's announcement about team restructuring. 6 of my 12 team members would be reassigned to other departments, primarily to support sales operations and customer service functions. The remaining team would focus on what Marcus characterized as core marketing activities: direct lead generation, basic content creation, and campaign analytics reporting. I listened to these announcements with growing recognition that Marcus was systematically dismantling the strategic marketing infrastructure I had spent 5 years building. The budget cuts weren't about efficiency optimization, they were about fundamental philosophical disagreement regarding marketing's role in business development. Marcus was transforming my department from strategic asset to tactical support function. The most crushing aspect of his announcement was the characterization of our work as failing to demonstrate measurable ROI. He cited analytics that focused exclusively on immediate lead-to-sale conversion, while ignoring brand development metrics, thought leadership positioning, and the strategic relationship building that was generating opportunities like the Pinnacle Systems contract. When Marcus finished his prepared remarks, he asked if there were questions or concerns about the restructuring plan. The invitation felt perfunctory rather than genuine, given that the decisions had clearly been finalized before this meeting. However, I felt obligated to advocate for the strategic initiatives that were being eliminated. I explained the status of the Pinnacle Systems opportunity, emphasizing the $12 million annual contract potential and the broader enterprise market access that successful completion would provide. I outlined the specific marketing activities that had been building this relationship and demonstrated how the proposed budget cuts would undermine our positioning during the critical vendor evaluation process. Marcus listened with the polite attention of someone who had already made contrary decisions but was maintaining professional courtesy during team communication. When I finished my presentation, he acknowledged the Pinnacle opportunity while explaining that TechFlow needed to focus on more immediate revenue generation rather than speculative enterprise contracts with uncertain timelines. His characterization of the Pinnacle opportunity as speculative revealed the fundamental gap between our strategic perspectives. What I considered patient relationship building towards significant long-term revenue, Marcus viewed as expensive uncertainty that couldn't be justified against quarterly performance metrics. The philosophical difference wasn't just about budget allocation, it was about completely different approaches to business development. Sarah Williams, our CFO, provided supporting analysis that focused exclusively on cost per lead metrics and immediate conversion rates. Her presentation ignored the strategic value of brand positioning and enterprise relationship building, instead emphasizing the efficiency gains that would result from concentrating marketing resources on direct response campaigns with measurable short-term outcomes. David Park, our head of sales, offered what seemed like reluctant support for the marketing restructuring, though his comments suggested discomfort with decisions that would eliminate the strategic support his team relied on for enterprise sales opportunities. His perspective highlighted another aspect of the philosophical disconnect. Marcus was optimizing for metrics that looked efficient on quarterly reports, while potentially undermining the relationship building that generated the most valuable sales opportunities. As the meeting concluded, Marcus emphasized his confidence that the streamlined marketing structure would deliver more efficient results while reducing operational costs. The team restructuring would be implemented over the following 2 weeks, with affected employees receiving appropriate transition support and reassignment opportunities within TechFlow. I left the meeting feeling not just professionally disappointed but personally undermined. 5 years of strategic building, relationship development, and team cultivation were being dismantled based on narrow metrics that failed to recognize the complexity of enterprise marketing. The budget cuts weren't just affecting current campaigns, they were destroying the foundation for TechFlow's long-term competitive positioning. Returning to my office, I found myself facing the immediate challenge of communicating these changes to my team. 12 talented professionals who had committed their expertise to building TechFlow's marketing capabilities would need to learn that their work was being devalued and their positions eliminated or fundamentally altered. The individual conversations with team members were among the most difficult professional discussions I had ever conducted. Each person had contributed specialized expertise to our collective success, and each deserved explanation and support during this transition. However, I struggled to provide meaningful justification for decisions that seemed strategically counterproductive. Chen, our senior content strategist who had developed the thought leadership materials that positioned TechFlow as an industry expert, would be reassigned to customer service communications. Her expertise in creating sophisticated analytical content would be redirected toward basic customer support materials. Michael Rodriguez, our social media specialist who had built TechFlow's influential presence across professional platforms, would transition to sales support, creating product brochures and basic promotional materials. The strategic community building and industry relationship development he had been cultivating would be abandoned. Emma Thompson, our campaign analytics specialist who had developed sophisticated attribution modeling that tracked the complex customer journey from initial brand awareness through contract signing, would be moved to basic lead reporting functions. Her advanced analytical capabilities would be simplified to focus on immediate conversion metrics. Each reassignment represented not just individual career disruption, but collective loss of strategic capabilities that had taken years to develop. The team infrastructure that supported sophisticated enterprise marketing was being systematically dismantled in favor of simplified tactical functions that could demonstrate immediate cost efficiency. As I worked through these conversations, I began formulating plans that extended beyond damage control. The budget cuts and team restructuring represented fundamental misalignment between my strategic vision and TechFlow's evolving priorities. Rather than accepting this philosophical defeat, I started considering alternatives that would allow me to continue developing the enterprise marketing strategies that Marcus was abandoning. The seed of what would become my independent consulting firm began forming during those difficult team conversations. If TechFlow no longer valued strategic enterprise marketing, perhaps there were other organizations that would appreciate the methodologies I had developed. The relationships I had been building, particularly with Pinnacle Systems, weren't owned by TechFlow. They were professional connections based on expertise and strategic insight. Over the following days, as I managed the practical aspects of budget reduction and team transition, I began researching the requirements for establishing an independent marketing consultancy. The idea seemed ambitious, perhaps unrealistic, but the alternative, accepting Marcus's narrow vision of marketing's role, felt professionally unsatisfying. My evening research sessions revealed that independent marketing consultancy was not only possible, but increasingly common in the technology sector. Many successful consultants had backgrounds similar to mine's: strategic marketing leadership, combined with specific industry expertise and established professional relationships. The key requirements were business registration, professional insurance, client acquisition strategy, and most critically, the confidence to value my expertise independently of institutional affiliation. The most encouraging discovery was that enterprise clients increasingly preferred working with specialized consultants rather than agency-based services for strategic marketing initiatives. Companies like Pinnacle Systems valued direct access to senior-level expertise rather than hierarchical agency structures, where strategic decisions filtered through multiple organizational layers. As I continued developing this concept, I realized that Marcus's budget cuts might have inadvertently created the opportunity I needed to pursue independent practice. The forced departure from TechFlow would provide the motivation and timeline necessary to establish consulting services, while the relationships I had been building would form the foundation for client acquisition. The plan took shape gradually over several late-night planning sessions in my apartment. I would establish comprehensive marketing consultancy specializing in enterprise client acquisition and strategic positioning for technology companies. The target market would be mid-size firms, seeking to expand into enterprise sales but lacking the internal expertise to develop appropriate marketing strategies. Most importantly, I would approach Pinnacle Systems directly, offering independent consulting services for their digital transformation initiative. The relationship I had been building with their leadership team was based on professional expertise rather than TechFlow affiliation. If I could provide superior strategic support through independent consulting, Pinnacle might prefer working directly with me rather than through TechFlow's increasingly limited marketing capabilities. This possibility represented more than just client acquisition. It was potential validation that the strategic approach Marcus had rejected was actually valuable enough to sustain independent practice. If Pinnacle chose to work with me directly, it would demonstrate that enterprise clients valued the relationship building and strategic positioning that TechFlow was abandoning. The business planning became increasingly detailed as I worked through financial projections, service offerings, and client acquisition strategies. Independent consulting required different operational structure than corporate marketing department, but the core expertise remained unchanged: strategic positioning, relationship building, and enterprise client development. By the end of my second week managing TechFlow's budget cuts and team transitions, I had developed a comprehensive plan for establishing independent marketing consultancy. The plan included business registration, professional development strategy, client acquisition approach, and most critically, direct outreach to Pinnacle Systems regarding independent consulting relationship. The evening I finalized these plans, I experienced clarity that had been absent during months of philosophical conflict with Marcus. Rather than continuing to advocate for strategic approaches with an organization that didn't value them, I would establish independent practice that could deliver those strategies directly to clients who recognized their importance. The irony wasn't lost on me that Marcus's budget cuts, intended to eliminate what he viewed as inefficient marketing spending, were actually creating conditions for me to compete directly with TechFlow for their most valuable client relationship. The relationship building he had questioned as speculative investment was about to become the foundation for independent practice that could potentially eliminate TechFlow's access to enterprise market opportunities. As I prepared to submit my resignation and announce my consulting firm launch, I realized that this transition represented more than career change. It was validation of strategic approach that corporate structures had failed to properly value. The expertise that TechFlow was abandoning would now be available to clients who could appreciate its strategic importance. The call I would make to Pinnacle Systems the following week would determine whether my strategic hypothesis was correct, whether enterprise clients would value direct access to senior marketing expertise enough to work with independent consultant rather than established firm. If successful, the relationship Marcus had dismissed as expensive speculation would become the foundation for competitive practice that could fundamentally alter TechFlow's market positioning. What Marcus didn't understand was that in technology marketing, relationships and expertise often transcend institutional boundaries. The strategic positioning work I had been developing for Pinnacle wasn't owned by TechFlow. It was professional capability that could be applied independently. His budget cuts hadn't eliminated that expertise. They had simply freed it from organizational constraints that were limiting its application. As I drafted my resignation letter that evening, I felt the satisfaction of turning corporate limitation into entrepreneurial opportunity. The marketing executive that Marcus had determined was too expensive to retain was about to become an independent competitor, with direct access to TechFlow's most important client relationship. The budget cuts that were supposed to optimize TechFlow's efficiency were about to create their most significant competitive threat. The resignation letter felt surprisingly light in my hands as I walked into TechFlow's offices the following Monday morning. After 3 sleepless nights of detailed business planning and legal research, I had crafted what I believed was the most professionally diplomatic, yet strategically decisive document of my career. The letter was brief, citing personal career development opportunities as the reason for my departure, with a standard 2-week notice period that would allow me to complete the transition of remaining marketing responsibilities. What the letter didn't mention was the comprehensive business registration paperwork I had filed over the weekend, establishing Summit Marketing Strategies LLC as a full-service digital marketing consultancy specializing in enterprise client acquisition. The business license application, professional liability insurance policy, and initial banking arrangements were already processing, creating the legal and financial infrastructure necessary for independent practice. I had spent Sunday afternoon transforming my home office into a professional workspace, installing additional phone lines, upgrading internet connectivity, and creating presentation capabilities that would support client meetings. The apartment's second bedroom, previously used for storage, had been converted into a conference space with professional lighting and video conferencing equipment. These preparations reflected my commitment to providing enterprise-level service quality, regardless of my independent status. Marcus was in early that morning, unusual for someone who typically arrived closer to 9 o'clock. His presence in the office at 7:30 suggested either increased attention to operational details following the budget restructuring or awareness that significant developments were pending. When I knocked on his office door at 8:15, his expression indicated he had been expecting this conversation. I handed him the resignation letter without preamble, maintaining the professional courtesy that had characterized our working relationship despite our strategic disagreements. Marcus read the document quickly, his expression shifting from administrative focus to what appeared to be genuine surprise, though I suspected the surprise was about timing rather than the decision itself. His immediate response was predictable corporate concern about transition planning and knowledge transfer, standard questions that revealed his focus on operational continuity rather than strategic implications. Marcus asked about project status updates, client relationship documentation, and timeline for transferring responsibilities to remaining team members. Throughout this conversation, his tone remained business-focused rather than personal, suggesting he viewed my departure as administrative challenge rather than strategic loss. What became clear during our discussion was that Marcus genuinely believed the marketing department restructuring had addressed TechFlow's efficiency requirements without considering the potential external consequences of my departure. His questions focused entirely on internal transition management, with no apparent recognition that client relationships might be affected by leadership changes. When I mentioned the need to communicate my departure to key clients and external contacts, Marcus suggested that such communications should emphasize continuity of service under new departmental structure rather than acknowledging the change in strategic leadership. His approach reflected the same perspective that had driven the budget cuts, prioritizing internal efficiency over external relationship management. I agreed to prepare comprehensive transition documentation for all active campaigns and client relationships, though I carefully avoided committing to specific client communication strategies. The transition materials would provide professional handover support while maintaining my ethical obligations to TechFlow, but I reserved the right to manage my professional relationships according to industry standards, rather than corporate messaging preferences. Over the following days, I methodically documented every aspect of my marketing leadership responsibilities, creating detailed project summaries, client relationship histories, strategic analysis reports, and implementation timelines. This documentation served dual purposes, providing TechFlow with thorough transition support, while creating comprehensive portfolio materials that would demonstrate my capabilities to potential independent consulting clients. The process of documenting 5 years of strategic marketing development revealed the breadth of expertise I had cultivated at TechFlow. Campaign analytics showed consistent outperformance against industry benchmarks. Client relationship records demonstrated sustained engagement with key decision-makers, and strategic planning documents outlined comprehensive approaches to enterprise market development that extended far beyond what most marketing departments typically provided. As I worked through this documentation process, I began receiving questions from team members who had heard about my resignation through informal office communication. The conversations were invariably supportive, with several colleagues expressing understanding of my decision given the recent departmental changes. More significantly, 3 team members privately inquired about potential opportunities to collaborate on independent projects once their TechFlow transitions were complete. Chen, whose content strategy expertise was being redirected toward basic customer service communications, was particularly interested in maintaining our professional relationship beyond TechFlow. Her specialized knowledge of technology industry thought leadership development would be invaluable for independent consulting practice, and her frustration with the departmental restructuring suggested openness to alternative professional arrangements. Michael Rodriguez expressed similar interest in potential collaboration, noting that his social media expertise was being underutilized in his new sales support role. The professional relationships he had developed across technology industry's social platforms represented valuable networking capabilities that could benefit independent consulting practice significantly. These conversations suggested that TechFlow's restructuring was creating broader talent retention challenges beyond my individual departure. By reassigning specialized marketing professionals to generic support functions, the company was not only losing strategic capabilities but potentially driving talented team members toward external opportunities that would better utilize their expertise. Meanwhile, I was quietly advancing the most critical component of my independent consulting strategy: direct outreach to Pinnacle Systems regarding their digital transformation marketing needs. The relationship I had been building with their executive team provided foundation for approaching them about independent consulting services, but the timing and approach required careful consideration to maintain professional integrity while maximizing opportunity potential. Janet Morrison, Pinnacle's Chief Technology Officer, had been my primary point of contact throughout the strategic relationship-building process. Our conversations had evolved from initial industry networking to substantive discussions about their digital transformation challenges and marketing requirements. Most importantly, Janet had consistently expressed appreciation for the strategic insights I provided, noting that my perspective differed significantly from the generic technology marketing approaches they typically encountered. Over the past 6 months, Janet had begun including me in strategic planning conversations that extended beyond typical vendor relationship boundaries. She regularly sought my input on industry trends, competitive positioning strategies, and digital transformation best practices. These discussions had established professional relationship based on mutual respect and strategic value exchange, rather than simple vendor-client interaction. The opportunity to transition this relationship from TechFlow representation to independent consulting required delicate navigation of professional ethics and business development strategy. I needed to approach Pinnacle about independent services without violating any non-compete agreements or client confidentiality obligations, while positioning my consulting firm as superior alternative to continued TechFlow engagement. My legal research had confirmed that the relationship-building activities I had conducted with Pinnacle were professional networking rather than proprietary client development, meaning I could leverage these connections for independent practice without legal constraints. However, ethical considerations required transparent communication about my departure from TechFlow and clear differentiation between my independent services and any ongoing TechFlow relationship with Pinnacle. Wednesday afternoon, I placed the call that would determine whether my strategic hypothesis about independent consulting was viable. Janet Morrison's assistant scheduled a conference call for Thursday morning. Noting that Janet was interested in discussing potential consulting opportunities related to Pinnacle's digital transformation initiative. The 24 hours between scheduling and conducting that call were among the most professionally significant of my career. Success would validate my belief that enterprise clients valued direct access to senior marketing expertise enough to work with independent consultants rather than established firms. Failure would suggest that institutional affiliation remained more important than individual capability in enterprise client relationships. I spent Wednesday evening preparing for the call with the same methodical approach I had always applied to important client presentations: comprehensive research about Pinnacle's recent business developments, detailed analysis of their digital transformation challenges, and strategic recommendations that demonstrated my understanding of their specific organizational context. The presentation materials I developed showcased not just my general marketing expertise, but specific insights about Pinnacle's competitive positioning and digital transformation opportunities. Rather than generic consulting services, I was proposing customized strategic support that addressed their unique challenges with innovative approaches that larger firms typically couldn't provide. Thursday morning's call exceeded my most optimistic expectations. Janet began the conversation by expressing disappointment about my departure from TechFlow, noting that my strategic insights had been instrumental in developing their digital transformation approach. However, she quickly transitioned to discussing how independent consulting relationship might actually provide better strategic support than working through TechFlow's increasingly limited marketing capabilities. Janet's perspective on TechFlow's recent changes was remarkably informed, suggesting that Pinnacle's leadership team had been monitoring developments at their potential vendor partners. She noted that budget cuts and team restructuring often indicated strategic misalignment that could affect vendor capability and relationship stability. From Pinnacle's perspective, Working directly with proven expertise might provide more reliable strategic support than continuing relationships with organizations undergoing significant internal changes. The conversation evolved into detailed discussion of how independent consulting engagement might be structured to provide Pinnacle with comprehensive digital transformation marketing support. Janet outlined specific project requirements that included strategic positioning development, content marketing strategy, thought leadership initiatives, and executive relationship building, precisely the type of comprehensive strategic work that TechFlow's restructured marketing department would no longer be capable of providing. Most encouraging was Janet's indication that Pinnacle's executive team had been discussing the possibility of engaging independent strategic consultants rather than traditional marketing firms for their digital transformation initiative. The decision wasn't just about individual expertise, but reflected broader preference for direct access to senior-level strategic thinking, rather than hierarchical agency structures, where decisions filtered through multiple organizational layers. By the call's conclusion, Janet had requested comprehensive proposal for independent consulting services that would support Pinnacle's digital transformation marketing requirements over an 18-month implementation timeline. The scope included strategic positioning development, content marketing execution, thought leadership positioning, industry relationship building, and comprehensive analytics reporting, exactly the type of integrated strategic support that represented independent consulting at its most valuable. The proposal timeline Janet requested was aggressive: 2 weeks for comprehensive service offering and pricing structure, but the opportunity justified the intensive development effort required. Success would establish Summit Marketing Strategies as Pinnacle's primary marketing consultant for their most significant strategic initiative, providing both substantial revenue foundation and credible reference for additional enterprise client development. I spent the remainder of Thursday and all of Friday developing what would become the most comprehensive consulting proposal of my career. The document outlined an integrated strategic approach that combined traditional marketing excellence with innovative digital transformation methodologies, specifically designed for Pinnacle's organizational context and competitive challenges. The proposal emphasized capabilities that institutional marketing departments typically couldn't provide: direct access to senior strategic thinking, customized methodology development, rapid implementation flexibility, and comprehensive project ownership rather than team-based service delivery. These advantages positioned independent consulting as superior alternative to traditional agency relationships for complex strategic initiatives. Pricing structure required careful calculation to ensure competitive positioning while reflecting the premium value of direct expert access. Enterprise consulting rates needed to demonstrate professional caliber while remaining attractive compared to agency pricing models that typically included significant overhead and margin components. The financial projections were encouraging. If Pinnacle accepted the full 18-month consulting proposal, the revenue would provide sustainable foundation for independent practice, while allowing for additional client development. More importantly, successful completion of Pinnacle's digital transformation marketing would create compelling case study for attracting similar enterprise clients. Friday evening, as I finalized the proposal documents, I received unexpected communication that would fundamentally alter the competitive dynamics of my situation. David Park, TechFlow's head of sales, sent a private message requesting confidential conversation about Pinnacle systems and the potential impact of my departure on their vendor evaluation process. David's message suggested that TechFlow's leadership was beginning to recognize the relationship implications of the marketing department restructuring. His request for confidential discussion indicated concern about client retention that hadn't been apparent during my resignation conversation with Marcus. We arranged to meet Saturday morning at a coffee shop downtown, away from TechFlow offices where such conversations might create additional complications. David's willingness to meet privately suggested significant concern about client relationship stability following my departure. Saturday's conversation revealed information that dramatically increased my strategic leverage in the evolving situation. David explained that Pinnacle Systems had been asking specific questions about TechFlow's marketing capabilities following news of departmental restructuring. Their vendor evaluation process included assessment of marketing support capabilities, and recent changes at TechFlow were raising concerns about service continuity and strategic alignment. More significantly, David revealed that Pinnacle represented nearly 30% of TechFlow's projected revenue for the following year. The $12 million annual contract I had been helping to develop was even more critical to TechFlow's financial stability than I had realized. Loss of Pinnacle's business would create substantial revenue gap that would likely necessitate additional cost reductions and potentially threaten overall company viability. David's perspective on the marketing department restructuring was notably different from Marcus's efficiency optimization narrative. From sales perspective, the budget cuts were eliminating strategic support capabilities that were essential for enterprise client acquisition and retention. The relationship building and thought leadership development that Marcus had characterized as expensive speculation were actually fundamental requirements for competing in enterprise markets. Most importantly, David confirmed that Pinnacle's leadership team had been specifically asking about my role in their vendor relationship and expressing concerns about service continuity following my departure. Janet Morrison had apparently made direct inquiries about TechFlow's ability to maintain strategic marketing support without my involvement. This information validated my strategic hypothesis about the importance of relationship building in enterprise client management. The connections I had developed with Pinnacle weren't just professional networking, they were critical business assets that TechFlow was losing through their restructuring decisions. David's request was straightforward but ethically complex. He wanted me to consider delaying my departure from TechFlow until after Pinnacle's vendor evaluation process was complete, ensuring that TechFlow retained their business before transitioning client relationships. In exchange, he suggested that Marcus might be willing to reconsider some aspects of the marketing department restructuring. The proposal revealed TechFlow's growing recognition of their strategic error, but it came too late to address the fundamental philosophical differences that had driven my resignation decision. More importantly, delaying my departure would compromise the independent consulting opportunity I was developing with Pinnacle, potentially eliminating the foundation for establishing summit marketing strategies. I explained to David that professional integrity required me to honor my resignation timeline, while maintaining appropriate transition support for TechFlow. However, I also noted that independent consulting relationship with Pinnacle might actually provide better strategic support than continuing relationships with organizations undergoing internal restructuring. David's expression during this conversation suggested he understood the implications of what I was describing. TechFlow was not just losing an employee, they were potentially losing their largest client to a competitor they had inadvertently created through their own restructuring decisions. Our conversation concluded with David requesting that I consider any arrangement that might preserve TechFlow's relationship with Pinnacle Systems. His concern reflected growing awareness within TechFlow that the marketing department restructuring had created unintended consequences that extended beyond internal efficiency optimization. However, by Saturday afternoon, my strategic direction was clear. Rather than attempting to preserve TechFlow's client relationships, I would focus entirely on establishing Summit marketing strategies as Pinnacle's preferred strategic marketing consultant. The proposal I was finalizing would offer superior service capabilities compared to TechFlow's restructured marketing department, while providing Pinnacle with direct access to proven expertise. Sunday was devoted to final proposal refinement and strategic planning for the week ahead. Monday would bring submission of comprehensive consulting proposal to Pinnacle Systems, effectively launching Summit marketing strategies as direct competitor to TechFlow for their most valuable client relationship. The proposal document represented more than business development opportunity. It was validation of strategic approach that corporate structures had failed to properly value. The relationship building that Marcus had dismissed as expensive speculation was about to become the foundation for independent practice that could fundamentally alter TechFlow's competitive positioning. As I prepared for Monday's proposal submission, I reflected on the remarkable transformation that had occurred over just 2 weeks. The marketing executive that Marcus had determined was too expensive to retain was about to become an independent competitor with direct access to TechFlow's most important client relationship. The budget cuts that were supposed to optimize TechFlow's efficiency had instead created their most significant competitive threat. The expertise they had chosen to eliminate was now being offered directly to the client they needed most to retain. Marcus's restructuring decisions were about to face their ultimate market test, whether enterprise clients valued strategic marketing expertise enough to work with independent consultants rather than established firms. The irony of the situation wasn't lost on me. TechFlow's attempt to reduce marketing costs was potentially about to cost them their largest source of revenue. The relationship-building activities Marcus had questioned as inefficient speculation were becoming the foundation for competitive advantage that could eliminate TechFlow's access to enterprise market opportunities. Monday morning would determine whether my strategic hypothesis was correct, whether Pinnacle Systems would choose direct access to proven marketing expertise over continued relationship with TechFlow's diminished capabilities. Success would establish Summit Marketing Strategies as formidable competitor in the enterprise marketing space, while demonstrating the strategic value of independent consulting relationships. The proposal submission would represent more than business development. It would be professional validation that expertise and relationship building transcend institutional boundaries. The marketing strategy that TechFlow had abandoned would now be available to clients who could appreciate its strategic importance, free from organizational constraints that had limited its application. As I completed final preparations for the week ahead, I experienced satisfaction that came from turning corporate limitation into entrepreneurial opportunity. The budget cuts that were intended to eliminate expensive marketing activities were about to demonstrate their true value through independent application that could fundamentally challenge TechFlow's market position. Monday morning arrived with the crisp October air that always made Seattle feel electric with possibility. I submitted the comprehensive consulting proposal to Pinnacle Systems at exactly 9 a.m., marking the official launch of Summit Marketing Strategies as an independent consultancy. The proposal represented 18 months of intensive strategic work, valued at $420,000, a figure that would establish my firm as a serious player in enterprise marketing consulting while providing sustainable foundation for business growth. The proposal was meticulously crafted to demonstrate not just my capabilities, but the superior value of direct expert access compared to traditional agency relationships. I had outlined integrated strategic approach that combined digital transformation expertise with relationship-building methodologies specifically designed for Pinnacle's organizational context. Most importantly, the proposal emphasized responsiveness and customization capabilities that larger firms simply couldn't match. Janet Morrison's response came within 4 hours, much faster than I had anticipated for such a significant proposal review. Her message was brief but encouraging, requesting a presentation meeting with Pinnacle's executive team scheduled for Thursday morning. The accelerated timeline suggested serious interest, though I understood that executive presentation would be the real test of whether Pinnacle was willing to transition from established vendor relationships to independent consulting partnership. Tuesday brought unexpected developments that would dramatically escalate the competitive dynamics I was navigating. Sarah Williams, TechFlow's chief financial officer, called my personal phone at 7 in the morning, an unusual communication method that immediately suggested significant concern about my consulting activities. Sarah's tone was professionally measured, but carried underlying tension that revealed the seriousness of the conversation. She had apparently learned about my proposal to Pinnacle Systems through industry networking channels, information that traveled much faster in Seattle's close-knit technology community than I had anticipated. Her call was ostensibly about transition coordination but clearly focused on understanding my consulting relationship development with TechFlow's most important client. The conversation was carefully diplomatic, with Sarah expressing appreciation for my professional transition approach while probing for details about my consulting proposal to Pinnacle. Her questions revealed that TechFlow leadership was becoming increasingly concerned about client retention following my departure, particularly regarding relationships I had been managing personally. What Sarah didn't directly state but clearly implied was that TechFlow was beginning to understand the strategic implications of their marketing department restructuring. The budget cuts that had seemed like efficiency optimization were creating client relationship risks that extended far beyond internal operational changes. My departure wasn't just affecting TechFlow's marketing capabilities, it was potentially threatening their most valuable client relationships. I maintained professional courtesy throughout the conversation, while carefully avoiding any commitments that might compromise my independent consulting development. When Sarah suggested that TechFlow might be willing to reconsider certain aspects of the departmental restructuring, I politely noted that my career direction had already been established, and professional obligations prevented reversal of decisions already made. The subtext of Sarah's call was unmistakable. TechFlow was recognizing that their restructuring decisions had created unintended competitive consequences. The marketing executive they had determined was too expensive to retain was now positioned to compete directly for their most important client relationship. Wednesday afternoon brought confirmation that TechFlow's concern was escalating into direct action. Marcus Chen called personally, abandoning the formal corporate communication style that had characterized our professional relationship for months. His tone was notably different from our resignation conversation, urgent rather than administrative, collaborative rather than hierarchical. Marcus began the conversation by acknowledging that TechFlow's recent restructuring decisions had created transition challenges they hadn't fully anticipated. His language was carefully chosen corporate speak for admitting strategic error without accepting direct responsibility for poor decision-making. However, his willingness to contact me personally suggested genuine concern about the business implications of my departure. The conversation evolved into what amounted to unofficial retention negotiation, with Marcus exploring various arrangements that might preserve my involvement with TechFlow while accommodating my independent consulting interests. He suggested consulting agreements, project-based collaborations, and even potential equity participation in exchange for continued client relationship management. Most significantly, Marcus revealed information that confirmed the strategic importance of the Pinnacle Systems relationship. The $12 million annual contract I had been developing represented not just substantial revenue but critical validation of TechFlow's enterprise capabilities. Loss of Pinnacle would affect not only immediate financial performance, but also competitive positioning for similar opportunities across the enterprise market. Marcus's desperation became evident when he suggested that TechFlow would be willing to serve as subcontractor for my independent consulting work with Pinnacle, essentially reversing the traditional vendor relationship dynamic. The proposal revealed how completely the competitive situation had shifted in just 2 weeks. However, what Marcus still didn't understand was that the philosophical differences driving my resignation couldn't be resolved through financial arrangements or structural modifications. The fundamental misalignment between his operational efficiency focus and my strategic relationship-building approach remained unchanged. His offers represented tactical responses to strategic problems rather than genuine recognition of the relationship-building methodologies that had created Pinnacle's interest in working with TechFlow originally. I maintained professional engagement throughout our conversation, while avoiding commitments that would compromise my independent consulting development. When Marcus requested advance notice of Pinnacle's decision regarding my consulting proposal, I explained that client confidentiality obligations prevented such disclosure, but noted that competitive consulting relationships were standard business practice in technology marketing. The conversation concluded with Marcus requesting ongoing dialogue about potential collaboration opportunities, language that suggested TechFlow's recognition that their relationship with Pinnacle might depend on maintaining some form of professional connection with me. Wednesday evening, I received unexpected communication from a source that would provide crucial intelligence about TechFlow's evolving strategy. Emma Thompson, the campaign analytics specialist who had been reassigned to basic reporting functions, reached out privately to share information she thought I should know about internal discussions following my departure. Emma explained that TechFlow's leadership team had been conducting intensive client retention analysis, focusing specifically on relationships that might be affected by the marketing department restructuring. Pinnacle Systems had been identified as the highest-risk client, with specific concerns about service continuity and strategic support capabilities following my departure. More significantly, Emma revealed that TechFlow was developing contingency plans for various scenarios related to the Pinnacle relationship. These plans included expanded sales support, external consulting arrangements, and even potential acquisition of independent marketing firms that could provide strategic capabilities they had eliminated through restructuring. The information Emma provided suggested that TechFlow was beginning to understand the full implications of their restructuring decisions. The budget cuts that had seemed like straightforward efficiency measures were creating strategic vulnerabilities that threatened fundamental business relationships. Emma also shared that several other team members were considering external opportunities following their reassignments to less strategic roles. The talent retention challenges I had anticipated were materializing faster than expected, creating additional operational pressures for TechFlow's already strained marketing capabilities. This intelligence confirmed that my timing for establishing independent consulting practice was strategically optimal. TechFlow's weakened marketing capabilities, combined with their client relationship concerns, created market opportunity for specialized consulting services that could provide strategic support their internal restructuring had eliminated. Thursday morning's presentation to Pinnacle's executive team represented the culmination of months of relationship building and weeks of intensive proposal development. The meeting was scheduled in Pinnacle's main conference room, a sophisticated space that reflected their position as a Fortune 500 manufacturing leader with serious technology transformation ambitions. Present were Janet Morrison as Chief Technology Officer, Robert Chen, the Chief Executive Officer, Lisa Wang, the Chief Financial Officer, and David Rodriguez, the Chief Operating Officer. The executive team composition indicated serious consideration of my consulting proposal, as such comprehensive leadership attendance typically occurred only for significant strategic decisions. I began the presentation by acknowledging the established relationship between Pinnacle and TechFlow, while positioning independent consulting as enhancement rather than replacement of existing vendor relationships. This approach demonstrated professional integrity regarding TechFlow, while establishing clear differentiation for my specialized services. The presentation emphasized capabilities that traditional marketing departments couldn't provide: direct access to senior strategic expertise, customized methodology development, rapid implementation responsiveness, and comprehensive project ownership rather than team-based service delivery. These advantages positioned independent consulting as a superior alternative for complex strategic initiatives requiring sustained executive attention. Robert Chen's questions revealed sophisticated understanding of marketing strategy and appreciation for the relationship-building approach I had been developing with their organization. His inquiries focused on implementation methodology, timeline management, and integration with Pinnacle's broader digital transformation objectives. Lisa Wang, approaching the decision from financial perspective, requested detailed analysis of consulting value compared to traditional agency relationships. Her questions demonstrated that Pinnacle's evaluation included comprehensive cost-benefit analysis rather than simple service comparison. Most encouraging was David Rodriguez's observation that independent consulting relationship would provide strategic flexibility that larger firms typically couldn't accommodate. His perspective suggested that Pinnacle valued adaptability and customization capabilities as much as marketing expertise itself. The presentation evolved into strategic discussion about Pinnacle's digital transformation goals and how specialized consulting support could accelerate their progress while maintaining competitive advantage. Rather than defending my proposal, I found myself collaborating with their executive team to refine strategic approach that would deliver optimal results for their specific organizational context. Janet Morrison's concluding comments indicated strong support for independent consulting relationship, noting that direct expert access would provide strategic advantages that hierarchical agency structures couldn't match. Her endorsement carried significant weight given her role as primary stakeholder for digital transformation initiatives. The meeting concluded with Pinnacle's executive team requesting 3 days for internal deliberation before final decision. Robert Chen noted that such significant strategic relationships required comprehensive evaluation, but expressed confidence that decision timeline would accommodate both organizations' planning requirements. As I left Pinnacle's headquarters Thursday afternoon, I experienced professional satisfaction that transcended simple business development success. The presentation had validated my belief that enterprise clients valued strategic expertise enough to work with independent consultants who could provide specialized capabilities and direct access to senior thinking. Thursday evening brought communication from an unexpected source that would provide additional validation of my strategic approach. Jennifer Torres, TechFlow's VP of Operations, reached out through LinkedIn with message requesting confidential conversation about independent consulting opportunities for other technology firms. Jennifer's message suggested that TechFlow's operational challenges extended beyond marketing department restructuring into broader strategic planning difficulties. Her inquiry about consulting availability indicated recognition that independent expertise might provide solutions that internal resources couldn't deliver effectively. Friday morning's conversation with Jennifer revealed information that dramatically expanded my understanding of TechFlow's strategic situation. The marketing department restructuring had been part of broader cost reduction initiatives affecting multiple departments, with similar efficiency optimization measures implemented across sales support, customer service, and product development functions. Jennifer explained that these restructuring decisions were creating operational coordination challenges that affected client service delivery and strategic planning capabilities. The expertise elimination that had seemed efficient from financial perspective was generating practical implementation problems that threatened service quality across multiple client relationships. Most significantly, Jennifer revealed that other clients had begun expressing concerns about service continuity following various departmental changes at TechFlow. The Pinnacle situation wasn't an isolated incident, but representative of broader client retention risks created by the company's restructuring approach. Jennifer's consulting inquiry focused on strategic planning support for operations optimization, specifically addressing how to maintain service quality while implementing cost reduction requirements. Her request represented potential second client opportunity for Summit marketing strategies, while providing additional validation that TechFlow's restructuring was creating market demand for specialized consulting services. The irony wasn't lost on me that TechFlow's efficiency initiatives were creating consulting opportunities for the expertise they had chosen to eliminate. The operational challenges Jennifer described were direct consequences of strategic decisions that prioritized cost reduction over capability preservation. Friday afternoon brought the call I had been anticipating since Thursday's presentation. Janet Morrison contacted me personally to communicate Pinnacle's decision regarding independent consulting engagement. Her tone was professional but positive, suggesting favorable outcome before she delivered the formal message. Pinnacle Systems had unanimously approved comprehensive consulting engagement with Summit Marketing Strategies for their digital transformation marketing initiative. The 18-month contract, valued at $420,000, would be executed immediately, with initial project phases beginning the following week. More importantly, Janet explained that Pinnacle's executive team had decided to transition their primary marketing support relationship from TechFlow to independent consulting arrangement with my firm. While TechFlow would maintain involvement in specific technical implementation components, strategic marketing leadership would be provided exclusively through Summit Marketing Strategies. The decision represented complete validation of my strategic hypothesis about independent consulting value. Enterprise clients did prefer direct access to proven expertise when such relationships could provide superior strategic support compared to institutional alternatives. Janet also revealed that Pinnacle's decision had been influenced by concerns about TechFlow's operational stability following their recent restructuring initiatives. From Pinnacle's perspective, working with independent consultant provided relationship security that vendor organizations undergoing internal changes couldn't guarantee. The contract terms exceeded my initial proposal in several important aspects. Pinnacle had requested expanded scope including competitive analysis, industry relationship building, and executive advisory services that would extend engagement value to nearly $500,000 over the 18-month implementation period. Friday evening, as I reviewed the signed consulting agreement from Pinnacle Systems, I realized that Summit Marketing Strategies had achieved in 1 week what typically required months of business development effort. The relationship building that Marcus had dismissed as expensive speculation had generated sustainable foundation for independent practice, while establishing competitive advantage against my former employer. The success with Pinnacle created immediate momentum for additional client development. Jennifer Torres's inquiry about operations consulting provided potential second engagement, while the relationship building I had conducted across Seattle's technology community offered multiple prospects for similar consulting opportunities. Saturday morning brought notification that would confirm the broader implications of my consulting success. Marcus Chen sent urgent message requesting emergency meeting to discuss what he characterized as critical business developments affecting TechFlow's strategic relationships. The message tone was notably different from our previous communications, desperate rather than diplomatic, acknowledging crisis rather than managing transition. Marcus's request for weekend meeting suggested that Pinnacle's decision had created immediate strategic pressure that TechFlow couldn't address through normal business channels. However, I had moved beyond the point where TechFlow's strategic challenges were my primary concern. Summit Marketing Strategies was now established as viable independent practice, with substantial client foundation and expanding opportunities. My focus had shifted from managing corporate relationships to building consulting business that could deliver superior strategic value to enterprise clients. Saturday afternoon's meeting with Marcus revealed the full extent of TechFlow's strategic miscalculation. He began the conversation by acknowledging that recent restructuring decisions had created unintended consequences that threatened fundamental business relationships. His language was careful, but the message was clear. TechFlow had made strategic errors that were affecting their competitive position. Marcus explained that Pinnacle's decision to transition primary marketing support to independent consulting had created immediate operational challenges for TechFlow. The technical implementation components they would retain represented a fraction of the original contract value, while the strategic relationship that had driven Pinnacle's initial vendor selection was now controlled by a competitor they had inadvertently created. The conversation revealed that TechFlow's financial projections for the following year had been built around continued growth of the Pinnacle relationship. Loss of primary marketing contract value created substantial revenue gap that would require either replacement client development or additional cost reduction measures. Marcus's proposal was both desperate and strategically logical. TechFlow wanted to engage Summit Marketing Strategies as subcontractor for strategic marketing services they could no longer provide internally. The arrangement would allow TechFlow to maintain client relationships while accessing expertise they had eliminated through restructuring. However, the proposal represented complete reversal of traditional vendor dynamics. TechFlow would essentially become client of the consulting firm established by the employee they had determined was too expensive to retain. The irony of the situation wasn't lost on either of us. I maintained professional engagement throughout the conversation while evaluating the strategic implications of various collaboration possibilities. Working with TechFlow as client could provide additional revenue stream for Summit Marketing Strategies while demonstrating the strategic value of independent consulting to broader market. Marcus's final request was direct and revealing. He wanted to understand what arrangements might preserve TechFlow's competitive position while accommodating the independent consulting success that had fundamentally altered their market relationship dynamics. The question confirmed that TechFlow leadership finally understood the strategic implications of their restructuring decisions. The marketing executive they had dismissed as expensive overhead had become competitor with direct access to their most important client relationships. As our meeting concluded, I realized that the strategic transformation was complete. Summit Marketing Strategies had established independent competitive position that forced TechFlow to acknowledge the strategic value they had failed to recognize when that expertise was available internally. The budget cuts that Marcus had implemented to optimize efficiency had instead created their most significant competitive threat. The relationship-building activities he had questioned as speculative investment had become foundation for consulting practice that could fundamentally challenge TechFlow's market position. Marcus's desperation to preserve some form of professional relationship reflected growing recognition that TechFlow's strategic direction had been fundamentally flawed. The efficiency optimization that had seemed financially prudent was proving strategically catastrophic. The weekend concluded with clear understanding that Summit Marketing Strategies had successfully transitioned from concept to competitive reality. The consulting firm established through TechFlow's strategic miscalculation was now positioned to capture additional market opportunities while forcing my former employer to reconsider their approach to expertise valuation and relationship management. The strategic reversal was complete. The marketing executive who had been deemed too expensive to retain had become the independent consultant, whose expertise TechFlow now needed to access through external engagement. The budget cuts intended to optimize efficiency had created competitive dynamic that threatened TechFlow's fundamental market position. Monday morning's phone call from Robert Chen, Pinnacle's CEO, marked a turning point that would reshape the entire competitive landscape. His voice carried the confident authority of someone about to make an announcement that would send shockwaves through Seattle's technology sector. The conversation began cordially enough, with Robert expressing satisfaction about our consulting engagement and the initial strategic work we had begun implementing for their digital transformation. However, the real purpose of his call became clear when he shifted to discussing Pinnacle's broader corporate development strategy. Robert explained that Pinnacle Systems had been evaluating acquisition opportunities in the Pacific Northwest technology market. seeking established firms with proven capabilities that could enhance their digital transformation services portfolio. The announcement he was about to make would fundamentally alter every relationship dynamic I had been navigating. Pinnacle Systems had completed due diligence and signed acquisition agreements to purchase TechFlow Industries for $48 million, a transaction that would close within 30 days pending regulatory approval. The irony was staggering. The same client relationship that Marcus had dismissed as speculative investment was now controlled by a company that had decided TechFlow's entire organization was worth acquiring. The strategic relationship building that had been characterized as expensive overhead had attracted an acquirer whose resources dwarfed TechFlow's entire market capitalization. Robert's explanation of the acquisition rationale revealed sophisticated strategic thinking that Marcus had completely failed to anticipate. Pinnacle needed established technology consulting capabilities to support their own digital transformation services expansion into new markets. TechFlow's client base, technical expertise, and market position provided foundation for scaling Pinnacle's consulting division across multiple industry sectors. Most significantly, Robert noted that my consulting relationship with Pinnacle had been instrumental in identifying TechFlow as attractive acquisition target. The strategic insights I had provided about technology consulting market dynamics had informed Pinnacle's expansion planning, while my detailed knowledge of TechFlow's capabilities and client relationships had facilitated their due diligence process. The conversation took an unexpected turn when Robert extended an offer that would complete the strategic reversal I had been orchestrating. Pinnacle wanted me to serve as Vice President of Strategic Development for their newly acquired consulting division, reporting directly to Pinnacle's executive team, while maintaining operational oversight of TechFlow's consulting services. The position would provide executive authority over the marketing department that had been restructured to eliminate my previous role. Marcus Chen would report to Pinnacle's integration team, while I would have strategic responsibility for rebuilding the consulting capabilities that TechFlow's budget cuts had damaged. Robert's offer included compensation package that reflected the strategic value Pinnacle placed on my expertise. Base salary of $200,000 plus equity participation in Pinnacle's consulting division expansion, with performance bonuses tied to client acquisition and revenue growth metrics I had been advocating throughout my tenure at TechFlow. The proposal represented complete validation of every strategic position I had maintained during months of conflict with Marcus over marketing department priorities. The relationship-building methodologies he had dismissed as inefficient speculation were now being recognized as essential capabilities for enterprise consulting success. However, accepting Pinnacle's offer would mean abandoning Summit marketing strategies just as the independent consulting practice was gaining momentum. The decision required careful evaluation of long-term strategic implications rather than immediate gratification of professional vindication. I requested time to consider Pinnacle's proposal while maintaining enthusiasm for their acquisition strategy. The conversation concluded with Robert noting that Pinnacle's integration planning would benefit significantly from my perspectives on TechFlow's organizational capabilities and market positioning. Tuesday brought a series of communications that revealed how quickly news of Pinnacle's acquisition was spreading through Seattle's business community. The technology sector's close-knit networking culture meant that major transactions became common knowledge within hours rather than days. Sarah Williams called early Tuesday morning, ostensibly to discuss transition coordination but clearly seeking information about my potential involvement in Pinnacle's acquisition plans. Her questions revealed that TechFlow's leadership team was scrambling to understand the implications of being acquired by their largest client. The conversation was professionally cordial but carried undertones of desperation, as Sarah attempted to gauge my willingness to support TechFlow through the acquisition transition. Her inquiry suggested that Pinnacle had made clear that successful integration would depend heavily on retaining key relationships and expertise that had been damaged by recent restructuring decisions. Marcus Chen's call later that morning was far more direct in acknowledging the strategic catastrophe his leadership had created. His tone was notably different from our weekend conversation, less defensive and more genuinely concerned about the practical implications of Pinnacle's acquisition for his own position within the merged organization. Marcus explained that Pinnacle's integration team had been asking detailed questions about TechFlow's marketing capabilities and client relationship management strategies. The inquiries focused specifically on understanding why strategic consulting clients had been concerned about service continuity following recent departmental changes. The subtext was unmistakable. Pinnacle's due diligence had identified marketing department restructuring as potential integration risk, particularly regarding client retention and service delivery capabilities. Marcus was beginning to understand that his efficiency optimization measures were now being evaluated as strategic liabilities by the acquiring company. Most revealing was Marcus's admission that Pinnacle had specifically requested information about my Mason consulting relationship with them and my potential availability for strategic roles within the merged organization. The request confirmed that my independent consulting success had positioned me as a valuable asset for Pinnacle's expansion strategy. Marcus's final comments revealed complete recognition of his strategic miscalculation. He acknowledged that eliminating marketing expertise had been short-sighted given Pinnacle's acquisition rationale, which specifically valued TechFlow's client relationships and strategic consulting capabilities. Wednesday afternoon brought unexpected communication from Jennifer Torres, who had been designated as TechFlow's liaison for Pinnacle's integration planning. Her message requested urgent consultation about organizational restructuring strategies that would support successful merger implementation. Jennifer's consulting request represented remarkable irony. TechFlow was now seeking to engage Summit marketing strategies for expertise about managing organizational transitions and maintaining client relationships during corporate restructuring, exactly the strategic capabilities Marcus had eliminated through budget cuts. The consulting opportunity was financially attractive, potentially generating $50,000 in advisory fees for supporting TechFlow's integration with Pinnacle. However, accepting the engagement would create complex conflict of interest considerations given Pinnacle's offer for me to join their executive team. Thursday morning's meeting with Pinnacle's integration team provided comprehensive overview of their acquisition strategy and my potential role in implementing their consulting division expansion. Present were Robert Chen, Janet Morrison, and 2 external consultants who specialized in technology sector mergers and acquisitions. The strategic vision outlined during this meeting was remarkably sophisticated, demonstrating that Pinnacle had developed comprehensive understanding of technology consulting market dynamics. Their acquisition of TechFlow represented an initial step in building integrated digital transformation services capability that could compete with major consulting firms across multiple industry sectors. Pinnacle's analysis of TechFlow's strengths and weaknesses aligned perfectly with my own assessments developed over 5 years of working within the organization. They had identified client relationship management, strategic planning expertise, and industry-specific knowledge as primary assets, while recognizing that recent restructuring had damaged service delivery capabilities and organizational culture. The integration strategy emphasized rebuilding strategic capabilities that had been eliminated through budget cuts, while expanding client service offerings to leverage Pinnacle's broader technology resources. The approach represented complete reversal of Marcus's efficiency optimization philosophy in favor of strategic investment in relationship building and expertise development. Most significantly, Pinnacle's planning recognized that successful integration would require rebuilding trust with clients who had been concerned about service continuity following TechFlow's recent organizational changes. My consulting relationship with Pinnacle positioned me as ideal candidate for leading this relationship repair and enhancement initiative. The meeting concluded with detailed discussion of reporting structures and authority relationships within the merged organization. As Vice President of Strategic Development, I would have direct responsibility for all client relationship management and strategic consulting services, with Marcus reporting to operations leadership focused on administrative and technical implementation functions. Thursday evening, I reached a decision that would complete the strategic transformation I had been orchestrating since submitting my resignation from TechFlow. I would accept Pinnacle's executive position while transitioning Summit marketing strategies into specialized consulting firm that could support Pinnacle's broader strategic development initiatives. The arrangement provided optimal integration of my professional interests with Pinnacle's expansion strategy. Rather than abandoning independent consulting entirely, I would maintain Summit marketing strategies as subsidiary operation that could provide specialized services to Pinnacle's consulting clients, while developing additional market opportunities. Friday morning's call to Robert Chen confirmed my acceptance of Pinnacle's offer while outlining the integrated approach that would maximize strategic value for both organizations. The conversation was enthusiastic and collaborative, with Robert expressing satisfaction that Pinnacle had secured executive leadership that understood both TechFlow's organizational dynamics and broader technology consulting market requirements. Robert's response to my subsidiary consulting proposal was particularly encouraging. Pinnacle viewed Summit Marketing Strategies as a valuable asset that could provide flexible service delivery capabilities, while maintaining independence that enterprise clients increasingly preferred for strategic consulting relationships. The compensation structure was finalized with provisions that recognized both my executive responsibilities and independent consulting contributions. Total compensation package approached $300,000 annually, plus equity participation, that could generate substantial returns if Pinnacle's consulting division expansion achieved projected growth targets. Friday afternoon brought the announcement that would send shockwaves through Seattle's technology community. Pinnacle Systems officially announced acquisition of TechFlow Industries with immediate executive appointments, including my designation as Vice President of Strategic Development for the merged consulting operations. The press release emphasized Pinnacle's commitment to expanding digital transformation consulting services while maintaining TechFlow's established client relationships and expertise. My appointment was specifically highlighted as demonstrating Pinnacle's focus on strategic consulting excellence and client relationship management. Industry response was immediate and largely positive, with several technology publications noting that Pinnacle's acquisition strategy demonstrated sophisticated understanding of consulting market dynamics. My transition from TechFlow employee to Pinnacle executive was characterized as strategic hiring that would strengthen the merged organization's competitive position. The weekend provided opportunity to reflect on the remarkable transformation that had occurred over 6 weeks. The marketing executive, who had been deemed too expensive to retain through budget cuts, had become executive leader of the consulting division that acquired her former employer. Marcus's efficiency optimization measures had eliminated expertise that was now being compensated at executive level by the acquiring company. The strategic relationship building he had dismissed as speculative investment had attracted acquisition offer that valued TechFlow's entire organization at $48 million. The budget cuts intended to optimize operational efficiency had instead created competitive vulnerability that made TechFlow attractive acquisition target for client who recognized strategic value that internal leadership had failed to appreciate. Monday morning brought my first day as Pinnacle's Vice President of Strategic Development, returning to the same offices where I had worked for 5 years but now with executive authority over the consulting services that had been restructured to eliminate my previous role. The strategic reversal was complete and undeniable. The relationship-building activities that Marcus had questioned as expensive overhead had generated acquisition interest from Fortune 500 company, whose resources provided foundation for expanding consulting capabilities beyond what TechFlow could have achieved independently. Summit Marketing Strategies remained operational as specialized consulting subsidiary, providing both additional revenue stream and strategic flexibility for pursuing opportunities that might not align with Pinnacle's broader corporate objectives. The irony was perfect and professionally satisfying. The marketing budget that had been cut by 60% was now being expanded by 300% under my executive leadership, with Pinnacle's resources providing foundation for implementing strategic consulting approaches that Marcus had been unwilling to support. The expertise that TechFlow had determined was too expensive to retain was now directing strategic development for consulting division worth multiple times TechFlow's original market valuation. The budget cuts that were supposed to optimize efficiency had instead created acquisition opportunity that provided validation for every strategic position I had maintained throughout months of corporate conflict. The transformation was complete, decisive, and deeply satisfying both professionally and personally. 3 months into my role as Vice President of Strategic Development at Pinnacle's Consulting Division, the transformation was exceeding even my most optimistic projections. The corner office that had once belonged to TechFlow's CEO now served as my headquarters for rebuilding the strategic capabilities that budget cuts had systematically destroyed. The view remained the same, but everything else had changed dramatically. My first priority had been reconstructing the marketing team that Marcus's restructuring had dismantled. Chen returned from customer service to resume her content strategy leadership, now with expanded resources and executive support that allowed her to implement sophisticated thought leadership initiatives across multiple industry sectors. Her satisfaction was evident in the innovative campaigns she developed, finally free from the budget constraints that had limited her creativity at TechFlow. Michael Rodriguez came back to social media strategy with enterprise-level tools and budget authority that transformed TechFlow's digital presence within weeks. The professional relationships he had been building were now supported by comprehensive content development and strategic community engagement that positioned our consulting services as industry leaders. Emma Thompson's analytical capabilities were unleashed with access to advanced marketing technology platforms that provided insights Marcus had refused to fund. Her sophisticated attribution modeling now tracked complex enterprise sales cycles across multiple touchpoints, demonstrating ROI patterns that validated every strategic relationship-building methodology we implemented. The team rebuilding process revealed the full extent of talent loss that TechFlow had experienced through budget cuts. Several specialists had accepted positions with competing firms during the restructuring period, taking valuable expertise and client relationships with them. Replacing these capabilities required significant recruitment investment and months of knowledge transfer that could have been avoided through strategic workforce planning. However, Pinnacle's resources enabled us to attract talent that TechFlow never could have recruited independently. Senior strategists from major consulting firms were drawn to our combination of enterprise backing and innovative service delivery approaches. The team we assembled represented upgrade in every capability area, positioning our consulting division for rapid expansion across multiple markets. The most satisfying aspect of the rebuilding process was implementing strategic methodologies that I had been advocating for years but lacked resources to execute properly. Comprehensive competitor analysis, advanced customer journey mapping, and sophisticated relationship management systems that connected marketing activities directly to revenue outcomes. Marcus's new role as Director of Administrative Operations provided daily reminder of how completely the organizational dynamics had shifted. He reported to Pinnacle's integration management team while I held strategic authority over consulting services that generated majority of the division's revenue. Our interactions were professionally cordial but carried obvious undercurrent of his recognition that efficiency optimization had been strategically counterproductive. During monthly operations reviews, Marcus presented administrative metrics while I outlined strategic initiatives and client development progress. The contrast was stark and telling, his focus on cost control versus my emphasis on capability building and relationship expansion. Pinnacle's leadership consistently demonstrated greater interest in strategic growth initiatives than operational efficiency measures. The financial results spoke definitively about the strategic value of investing in marketing expertise rather than cutting costs. Within 6 months of the acquisition, our consulting division's revenue had increased by 40%, driven primarily by expanded services to existing clients and successful acquisition of enterprise contracts that had been beyond TechFlow's previous capabilities. Pinnacle Systems became our showcase client, implementing comprehensive digital transformation strategy that demonstrated integration between marketing excellence and technical implementation. The success generated case study materials that attracted similar opportunities across manufacturing, logistics, and technology sectors. Summit Marketing Strategies continued operating as specialized subsidiary, providing consulting services to clients who preferred independent relationship structures, while generating additional revenue streams that supported our broader strategic development initiatives. The subsidiary model proved particularly effective for serving clients who competed with Pinnacle in certain market segments. The most rewarding development was establishing strategic partnerships with other consulting firms that recognized our specialized expertise in enterprise client acquisition and relationship management. These collaborations provided access to opportunities that individual organizations couldn't pursue independently, while demonstrating market validation of methodologies that Marcus had questioned. 6 months after Pinnacle's acquisition announcement, I received communication that would provide ultimate validation of the strategic transformation we had orchestrated. The Pacific Northwest Technology Association selected our consulting division for their annual Excellence in Strategic Innovation Award, recognizing our integration of relationship-building methodologies with advanced digital marketing technologies. The award citation specifically noted our success in demonstrating ROI for strategic consulting investments that many organizations struggled to justify. The recognition came from industry peers who understood the complexity of enterprise consulting relationships and the difficulty of maintaining strategic focus during operational pressures. Robert Chen's comments during the award ceremony reflected Pinnacle's satisfaction with acquisition results that exceeded their original projections. He noted that our consulting division had become Pinnacle's fastest-growing business unit while maintaining client satisfaction ratings that surpassed industry benchmarks. Most significantly, Robert acknowledged that my strategic approach to client relationship management had informed Pinnacle's broader business development strategy across all their divisions. The methodologies we had implemented for consulting services were being adapted for manufacturing partnerships and technology licensing relationships. The industry recognition generated additional opportunities that demonstrated the compounding effects of strategic relationship building. 2 Fortune 500 companies approached us directly about comprehensive consulting engagements, after learning about our award recognition through professional networking channels. These opportunities represented exactly the type of enterprise contracts that Marcus had characterized as speculative investments with uncertain returns. However, our track record now provided concrete evidence that relationship-building methodologies generated measurable business results when implemented with appropriate strategic support and resources. The personal satisfaction of the transformation extended beyond professional vindication to genuine fulfillment about contributing to meaningful organizational success. The strategic capabilities that had been dismissed as expensive overhead were now generating growth that benefited hundreds of employees and dozens of client organizations. A year after submitting my resignation from TechFlow, I stood in the same Seattle office building, but with completely transformed professional identity and organizational authority. The marketing executive who had been deemed too expensive to retain was now directing strategic development for consulting division valued at over $100 million. The budget cuts that were intended to optimize efficiency had instead created acquisition opportunity that generated returns far exceeding any cost savings Marcus had achieved. The relationship-building activities he had questioned as wasteful spending had attracted Fortune 500 acquirer, whose resources enabled consulting capabilities that surpassed TechFlow's original potential. Marcus's efficiency optimization philosophy had been decisively refuted by market results that demonstrated strategic value of investing in expertise and relationship development. The consulting division's success provided case study for other Pinnacle business units about the returns available through strategic workforce investment rather than cost reduction. The transformation was complete, measurable, and professionally satisfying in ways that transcended individual career advancement. The strategic methodologies that corporate structures had failed to properly value were now being implemented at scale with resources and support that demonstrated their full potential. Summit Marketing Strategies maintained its independent status while contributing to Pinnacle's broader strategic objectives, providing optimal integration of entrepreneurial flexibility with corporate resources. The subsidiary relationship demonstrated that expertise could be leveraged across multiple organizational contexts, while maintaining specialized focus and strategic independence. The story concluded with perfect irony and complete professional validation. The marketing budget that had been slashed by 60% was now being expanded by 500% under my executive leadership, with Pinnacle's resources providing foundation for implementing strategic consulting approaches that Marcus had consistently opposed. The expertise that TechFlow had determined was financially unsustainable was now generating revenue streams that supported comprehensive consulting division, with capabilities that extended far beyond what any individual organization could have achieved through efficiency optimization alone. The relationship building that had been dismissed as speculative investment had created business value that exceeded Marcus's most optimistic projections for cost reduction savings. The strategic transformation demonstrated that expert capability, when properly supported and strategically applied, could generate returns that made efficiency optimization seem remarkably short-sighted. The corner office that had once symbolized corporate hierarchy now represented entrepreneurial success story about strategic expertise, transcending organizational boundaries and creating value that benefited multiple stakeholder groups. The budget cuts that were supposed to optimize TechFlow's operations had instead created competitive dynamic that culminated in acquisition by the very client relationship those cuts had threatened to destroy. The professional journey from dismissed employee to executive leader of the division that acquired my former employer represented complete validation of strategic relationship-building methodologies that had been questioned throughout months of corporate conflict. The transformation was decisive, measurable, and deeply satisfying both personally and professionally. 2 years after the acquisition, the phone call that had begun this entire journey came full circle in the most unexpected way. Marcus Chen was calling me again, but this time from the unemployment office, his voice carrying none of the corporate authority that had once dismissed my strategic expertise as too expensive to justify. The irony was almost too perfect to believe. Pinnacle's post-acquisition efficiency review had concluded that Marcus's position as Director of Administrative Operations was redundant with existing corporate infrastructure. The same cost-cutting philosophy he had applied to my marketing team had ultimately been applied to his own role by executives who viewed his administrative functions as unnecessary overhead. His call was ostensibly about professional references for job applications, but the underlying message was unmistakable. The efficiency optimization expert who had eliminated my budget was now seeking assistance from the executive, whose strategic methodologies were generating record revenue for Pinnacle's consulting division. I maintained professional courtesy throughout our conversation, providing the positive reference Marcus requested while reflecting privately on the dramatic reversal of our respective positions. The marketing executive he had deemed expendable was now authoring strategic plans that guided Pinnacle's expansion into new markets, while the CEO who had prioritized cost reduction was struggling to find organizations that valued his operational approach. The conversation revealed that Marcus had been applying similar efficiency optimization strategies throughout his post-TechFlow job search, emphasizing cost reduction achievements rather than growth generation or strategic capability building. However, the technology consulting market had evolved toward valuing relationship building and strategic expertise over administrative efficiency, making his skill set less relevant to current organizational needs. When Marcus asked about potential opportunities within Pinnacle's consulting division, I explained that our hiring priorities focused on strategic thinking and client relationship management rather than cost optimization. The capabilities we sought were precisely those he had systematically eliminated during his tenure at TechFlow, creating philosophical misalignment that made collaboration unlikely. The call concluded with Marcus expressing regret about the strategic decisions that had led to our professional conflict at TechFlow. His acknowledgement came too late to affect the trajectory that had been set in motion by his budget cuts, but it provided personal closure to the corporate battle that had ultimately redefined both our careers. 6 months later, I received notification that would provide final validation of the strategic approach I had been advocating since my TechFlow resignation. The Harvard Business Review had selected our consulting division's transformation story as case study for their upcoming issue on strategic workforce investment versus cost optimization in technology sector organizations. The case study analysis, conducted by Harvard Business School faculty, examined the measurable business outcomes generated by rebuilding strategic capabilities versus the short-term cost savings achieved through workforce reduction. Our experience provided compelling evidence that investment in expertise and relationship building generated superior long-term returns compared to efficiency optimization approaches. The research revealed that organizations implementing strategic workforce investment showed average revenue growth of 35% over 3 years, while companies pursuing cost reduction strategies averaged only 8% growth during the same period. Our consulting division's 47% revenue increase positioned us among the top performers in strategic investment outcomes. Most significantly, the Harvard analysis identified relationship-building methodologies as critical differentiator between high-performing and average consulting organizations. The strategic approaches that Marcus had dismissed as expensive speculation were now being studied as best practices for enterprise consulting success. The publication generated speaking opportunities at major industry conferences, where I presented our transformation story to executives facing similar decisions about strategic investment versus cost optimization. The audiences consistently responded with questions about implementation methodology rather than challenges to strategic philosophy, indicating broad recognition that relationship-building approaches delivered measurable business value. One presentation at the Technology Leadership Forum resulted in consulting engagement with 3 Fortune 500 companies that wanted to implement similar strategic relationship-building programs within their own organizations. These opportunities demonstrated that our methodologies had application beyond individual consulting practices to broader organizational development initiatives. The success also attracted acquisition interest from larger consulting firms that recognized the strategic value of our relationship-building expertise and client portfolio. However, Pinnacle's leadership made clear that our consulting division represented core asset for their long-term growth strategy rather than short-term revenue opportunity. Robert Chen's annual review comments reflected Pinnacle's satisfaction with acquisition results that had exceeded every projection. The consulting division now contributed 30% of Pinnacle's total revenue, while maintaining profit margins that surpassed their manufacturing operations. Most importantly, our client relationships had generated strategic partnerships that enhanced Pinnacle's competitive position across multiple business segments. The transformation had created sustainable competitive advantage that extended beyond individual client contracts to industry positioning that attracted top talent and premium opportunities. The relationship-building methodologies that Marcus had questioned were now recognized as proprietary capabilities that differentiated Pinnacle from competitors who relied on traditional service delivery approaches. Summit Marketing Strategies continued expanding as independent subsidiary, now serving clients across technology, manufacturing, and professional services sectors. The specialized consulting firm had evolved into comprehensive strategic development practice that applied relationship-building methodologies to various industry contexts, while maintaining focus on enterprise client acquisition. The subsidiary model had proven particularly effective for serving clients who valued independent consulting relationships while benefiting from Pinnacle's resources and strategic support. This arrangement provided optimal integration of entrepreneurial flexibility with corporate infrastructure, demonstrating that expertise could be leveraged across multiple organizational structures. The personal satisfaction of this professional journey extended beyond career advancement to genuine fulfillment about contributing to organizational success that benefited hundreds of employees and dozens of client organizations. The strategic capabilities that had been dismissed as expensive overhead were now generating economic value that supported comprehensive ecosystem of professional relationships and business opportunities. The final vindication came through industry recognition that positioned our transformation story as model for strategic workforce development in technology consulting sector. The Pacific Northwest Business Journal featured our consulting division on their annual cover story about innovative business strategies, highlighting the measurable returns generated through strategic investment in expertise and relationship building. The article emphasized that our success demonstrated practical alternative to cost reduction approaches that dominated corporate strategy during economic uncertainty. Rather than cutting expenses to improve margins, organizations could invest in strategic capabilities that generated revenue growth sufficient to support expanded operations while improving competitive positioning. The coverage generated additional opportunities that demonstrated the compounding effects of strategic relationship building combined with measurable business results. Two private equity firms approached Pinnacle about potential partnerships that would leverage our consulting methodologies across their portfolio companies, creating opportunities for scaling strategic approaches beyond individual client relationships. These discussions represented evolution from consulting service provider to strategic methodology developer, with potential licensing opportunities that could generate revenue streams independent of direct client engagement. The intellectual property we had developed through years of relationship building and implementation experience was now being recognized as valuable asset for broader market application. The story reached its conclusion with perfect symmetry and complete professional validation. The marketing executive, who had been deemed too expensive to retain through budget cuts, was now directing strategic development initiatives that influenced business strategy across multiple organizations and industry sectors. The budget cuts that were intended to optimize operational efficiency had instead created competitive vulnerability that resulted in acquisition by client whose resources enabled consulting capabilities that surpassed original organizational potential by orders of magnitude. The strategic relationship building that had been dismissed as wasteful spending had generated business value that exceeded cost reduction savings by factors that made efficiency optimization seem remarkably short-sighted. Marcus's attempt to eliminate expensive marketing activities had inadvertently created conditions for demonstrating that strategic expertise, when properly supported and strategically applied, could generate returns that transformed struggling organizations into industry leaders. The relationship-building methodologies he had questioned were now being studied and implemented by organizations across multiple sectors as proven approaches for sustainable business development. The corner office that had once symbolized corporate hierarchy now represented entrepreneurial success story about strategic expertise, transcending organizational boundaries and creating value that benefited multiple stakeholder communities. The transformation demonstrated that individual capability, when aligned with appropriate resources and strategic vision, could generate outcomes that exceeded the limitations of traditional organizational structures. The professional journey from dismissed employee to industry thought leader represented complete validation of strategic approaches that had been systematically questioned throughout months of corporate conflict. The expertise that TechFlow had eliminated through cost optimization was now generating consulting revenue that supported comprehensive business ecosystem, extending far beyond what individual efficiency measures could have achieved. The irony was perfect, measurable, and deeply satisfying both personally and professionally. The marketing budget that had been reduced by 60% was now being expanded across multiple organizations as proven methodology for generating sustainable competitive advantage through strategic relationship building and expertise development. The final lesson was clear and unequivocal: strategic investment in expertise and relationship building generated measurable returns that made cost optimization approaches seem not just financially inferior, but strategically counterproductive. The transformation had demonstrated that individuals and organizations succeeded by building capabilities rather than reducing costs, by investing in relationships rather than eliminating expenses, and by developing expertise rather than optimizing efficiency. The phone call that had marked the beginning of this journey now seemed like ancient history, replaced by strategic communications about expansion opportunities and industry leadership initiatives that extended the impact of relationship-building methodologies far beyond what any individual consulting engagement could have accomplished independently. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.